This is Uncensored Conservatism, episode 147. We're looking at Project 2025, what's in it, and we're going to do Chapter 12 today. So, Chapter 12 deals with the Department of Energy and was written by Bernard McNamee, who was an energy official in the Trump administration earlier. It basically argues for a policy of energy and science dominance where Americans have abundant, reliable, and affordable energy. I mean, this is real controversial stuff, eh? It would also create good paying jobs, support domestic manufacturing, and enhance national security. It notes that previous energy crises were created by foreign actors since we were a major importer of oil and gas. Today, we have a domestically created energy crisis through the so-called green energy initiatives of the Biden administration, who sees climate change as one of their many existential threats. After this guy, I'm losing track of all their existential threats. Anyway, McNamee notes that we need to reprioritize our energy policy and be more realistic because wind and solar power alone is not going to do it. Those are just pipe dreams of the left. We must promote energy security and also that of our allies and diminish our adversaries. If he and Russia are a threat, energy is our best weapon. Project 2025 also calls for the disposal of nuclear waste becoming a priority, as well as preventing threats against the energy grid. Project 2025 correctly notes that the focus of the Energy Department is not science and technology, but commercialization, which translates into government subsidies. 3 specific programs should be terminated: clean energy demonstrations, state and community energy programs, and grid deployment. This would affect the bulk of grants. The export of liquefied natural gas to allies, especially in Europe, should be part of any free trade agreement, unless, Europe wants to remain reliant on this guy. The government should take the lead by using reliable energy sources in government-owned businesses instead of virtue signaling with green energy initiatives like an electric vehicle fleet. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission was created to make sure there's an adequate and reliable supply of energy to meet domestic needs. Under Biden, it's been transformed into a climate change regulator. The Nuclear Regulatory Agency is not part of the Department of Energy, but Project 2025 calls for more use of nuclear energy to meet our needs. Under Biden, the Department of Energy has become politicized over 2 things: diversity hiring and climate change. Both of this has to stop. The Department of Energy oversees 17 laboratories. Only 3 deal with national security. Those 3 should be left alone, and the other 14, it is suggested, should focus on basic science and technology, or perhaps be streamlined or eliminated or sold off. Deployment of technology must be left to the private sector. Cleanup of government nuclear sites is a pressing issue that has been long overlooked. The Nuclear Waste Fund holds $46 billion in payments from utility companies and ratepayers and suggests using that money to finally create a depository for civilian nuclear waste at Yucca Mountain in Nevada. And yes, this dynamic duo will bitch and complain, but let them. McNamee suggests making sure that our nuclear warheads are up to date and that we have adequate access to uranium mines. There should be added emphasis on energy grid security. All applied energy program grants should be eliminated. That includes grants for energy storage and grid enhancing technologies. That should be a concern of private industry. Threats against electricity generating plants and natural gas pipelines should be a priority also. Of course, wind and solar power only go so far toward meeting our needs. When they fail, there should be more reliable backups in place. The department's involvement in nuclear energy should be minimized. Assuming the Nuclear Regulatory Agency or Commission streamlines and speeds up the licensing process, development should be left to the private sector. France gets most of its energy from nuclear sources, and guess what? They have zero problems with it. So why can't we? Because of irrational fears and the NIMBY complex. These are the same people who bitch when the lights go out. All regulatory obstacles to an all of the above energy policy is a must within guardrails, and that includes nuclear power, a reliable long-term source of energy that creates no greenhouse gases. The Department of Fossil Energy has been transformed from one of improving fossil fuel production to one of decreasing carbon dioxide emissions. If there's to be so-called carbon capture technology, let that be private commercial level, not a priority of the federal government. Recent subsidies in this area have done nothing to enhance the viability of carbon capture technology. America sits on vast reserves of coal. If we aren't going to use it, then export it to countries that will use it and do use it. The vast majority of critical minerals are in Russia and China, but we have them here also, or with our allies do. Access to a reliable supply is a must. Liquefied natural gas as an export is vitally important. Biden rescinded several Trump policies that made it easier to grant licenses for its export. Fracking and other technologies have allowed us to extract enough natural gas to meet our needs and the needs of allies. If we're not to use coal, then it has to be natural gas. There has to be a focus on ending all the stupid green energy initiatives of the Biden administration that affected electricity production, the industrial sector, transportation, buildings, and agriculture. Energy efficiency standards for home appliances need to be ended. They can be rated for consumer information purposes, but not mandated. Telling an American consumer what type of stove or water heater they can purchase is not the role of the federal government. So just give them an efficiency rating or, talk about their life cycle or cost of repair and let the consumers make the choices from there. FERC should end grid planning and instead focus on reliability. Planning to the left is windmills and solar panels, not reliable sources of energy. The department administers a $20 billion fund to transition from reliable energy sources to green renewable sources. These subsidies must end. In effect, the government is funding projects that the private sector does not fund and rightfully should. The government is picking winners and losers, and your tax dollars are paying for this fight. The Clean Energy Corps, a boondoggle that aims to add 1,000 federal employees to combat climate change through the department, needs to be killed. And the Biden administration basically agreed to climate reparations to third world countries. This is a classic example of international wealth redistribution, and we need to tell the UN to screw off. A little increased funding for a nuclear site cleanup now will save $500 billion over 10 years. There should be a 10-year goal to do something, excluding the Hanford site in Washington, which will take much longer. As noted earlier, it's time to end the crap about Yucca Mountain in Nevada. While we dither, there is over 80,000 tons of spent civilian nuclear waste waiting to be deposited. And of course, nuclear energy design efficiency and safety have increased over the years. It's time to get more nuclear plants online in this country. It suggests 2 plutonium pits for military use at Los Alamos in New Mexico and Savannah River in South Carolina. And speaking of Los Alamos, it, along with Lawrence Livermore and Sandia Labs, should focus on nuclear deterrence. Also, grid reliability is a major concern because, as we've seen, solar and or wind is not reliable as, say, natural gas. But for natural gas to be used, which we have in abundance, there has to be upgrades to the existing pipeline structure. And when are these shortages most noticeable with green energy? Why is it winter when it's cold and summer when it's hot? The screeching of these nitwits means squat if they're dead from heat exposure or they're frozen to death. Green energy companies really love subsidies from the federal government. States like New Jersey and their offshore wind farm crap, besides killing whales, will distort market prices for years to come. The taxpayer and the ratepayer, you're the loser. So there's nothing that controversial here, and probably nothing you haven't heard before. It simply refutes the emphasis on climate change and these idiots and this idiot. It calls for an all-of-the-above energy policy without government subsidies, including more nuclear power generation. Actually doing, not talking about and studying, cleaning up nuclear sites, which is something that hasn't been discussed all that much in the media or elsewhere. Making America energy independent while strengthening our European allies. It also says nothing about the Keystone Pipeline, by the way, but expect the possible resumption of that debate and expect the protests to dominate some headlines in the next 4 years. And that's it. Nothing new. It may be controversial if you're this person, or this guy, or maybe even this guy, or these nutcases, or these people, but not to anyone else. Have a great day and a more pleasant tomorrow.